to item number 15, I believe, Mr. Clerk. Okay. Which is the resolution to approve the notice of intent to issue capital bonds, capital improvement bond series 2019 limited tax obligation in the amount not to exceed $19,500,000.00 for the purpose of paying all or part of the cost of occurring, constructing, furnishing, and equipping improvements to the parking deck, plaza, and related improvements to the city's fitness center. Attorney Sharp.
I want to reserve my comments until after the presentation of the executive office.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Brian Loeffler with Robert W. Baird. We serve as municipal advisor to the city of Pontiac. Ron Liscombe, the attorney for Miller Canfield, gives his regrets. He's not able to be here. You've seen him present with me on this issue, this form of a resolution, and the other resolutions that are in your packet today. So the concept here is this is the first step to do the notice of intent to have a publication in a newspaper of general circulation of the city of Pontiac regarding the possible expenditure or issuance of bonds in an amount not to exceed $19.5 million. As Council President Williams mentioned, in the whereas, the purposes are so defined, and also in the ordinance, or excuse me, in the resolution, there's the form of the notice that would be provided or printed in the paper. What this does is essentially gives everybody in the city the opportunity to say this is what's going to possibly happen in the sense of issuing bonds. There's a process where there's a possibility for a referendum period, and signatures can be gathered as noted in the notice, and that there's a 45-day period after the notice is published in the newspaper. This is just the first step. Once this 45-day period has elapsed, there's enough petitions that it's going to go to a vote, or it's just going to allow the city council to proceed with the next step, which is that we would have to be coming back to the city council and have them issue bonds, adopt a resolution to issue additional bonds. I heard here earlier and over the past few months the concerns about the costs, the term, things related to be improved at the Scenic Center. So one of the things that is that as your ordinances or your resolutions, you're just going to have to comply with state statute. So for purposes here, the bonds cannot be issued for more than a period of 30 years. That's statutory. Can't change that. The second thing is that what's going to be financed by the proceeds from the bonds is what's called a useful life. You may have the Phoenix Center, the ramp may last another 50 years. You may sell bonds to fix that portion for 30. There may be electrical equipment that can be installed in new lights. They may have a useful life of 10 years. The cost of that is going to be repaid over a 10-year period. That's something that, from a finance perspective, because you're going to possibly have to do continually ongoing maintenance of the facility after it's once brought up to code. So with that, the proposed $19.5 million was based on a report that talked about doing the structural, electrical, also doing the plaza and the top. Also, since this is the report that we were provided, was almost a year old. We all know what has happened in the last year. The cost of doing construction has increased some. So what was added to that $16 million was some number, about 4 to 5%. So as the time goes on, we want to make sure sufficient dollars available for the RFP that's going to go out to fix the facility, that there's essentially enough dollars available. Again, it's a cap, so to speak, but it's going to be based on some numbers associated with that. Truth in lending, I heard that today. I've heard that before. One of the things that Robert W. Baird, as your municipal advisor, is concerned about the cost of money and the interest rates and the structure. So one of the things is that, as you probably have been seeing, interest rates have really been coming down again. The Federal Reserve In the last Fed meeting, dropped him 25 basis points. Everybody's anticipating that possibly that's going to happen again here in the next couple of weeks. That impacts your cost of money. And one of the things that's happening right now is with this 45-day period of publishing the notice, you can't really access the capital markets for at least 60 days to maybe 90 days. So we're watching those interest rates. Pontiac has not been in the capital markets. One of the things that you do have is a good fund balance. You have very little unfunded liabilities, costs, compared to some of your neighboring cities and school districts that are in this area. And that's almost like an albatross around their neck. And so when I heard the words Moody's and S&P, my ears pick up, because that's essentially your TransUnion, your Equifax credit score. We've already done preliminary grading of the city. We're either thinking you're a high A or a double A credit. State of Michigan is a double A. The federal government's only a double A plus from S&P, triple A. So what that means is that you essentially are rising, just like the Phoenix, extending you have your rate, your higher the bond rating, the lower your interest cost. So this is part of the solution of trying to fix the Phoenix Center. The last thing is, again, the term is going to be based upon what's going to be included in the bond proceeds for fixing. So again, that's one of the things we worry about is useful life. And the cost is, for a 30-year transaction today in this marketplace, like 3.5%. Money is very, I'm going to say, inexpensive today, so let's try to capitalize it. And the last thing here is that this is going to be structured within your current charter millage. We're not asking for any additional millage to be levied on the residents. It's going to be built into your current general fund budget. And that's one of the things that we want to make very clear. What you're voting on, or at least being this resolution will allow for the issuance of bonds, the referendum period, get the notice published, start that process, and then we'll be back. We're going to start talking about what the report is, what kind of term, what are true interest rates at that time. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them, unless there's somebody else.
Is there anybody else for your presentation? Attorney Sharp?
Just some things to throw out. So in reviewing the notice of intent resolution, in terms of your bond counsel and your municipal advisor, their fees and expenses are payable at the cost of issuance from proceeds of the bonds, but we don't know what that cost is. So I'm just throwing that out there. What is that cost for both your company, your firm, as well as Miller Canfield?
Usually it's set as a percentage of the size of the transaction. So in ours, it would be not to exceed 2%. And I don't know what Mr. Liscombe had quoted to the city. I was not aware of that.
And then I just wanted to say, so a couple of weeks ago, Council President, you asked me to give some comments on the settlement agreement. And I explained at that time that I did not have the documents in front of me. So I did, in fact, bring some excerpts just so I can bring to your attention what I think to be relevant. There are two important pieces, I think. One is the cash portion. With the settlement, the cash portion, let's say, is $7,350,000. We've already paid $3,500,000. The other portion of that, and we paid $350,000 in attorney fees. So I brought some copies in case council members would like to look at it. You can pass those down. Unfortunately, it's marked up because those are my notes. So the other $3,500,000, just to keep in mind, will be paid annually in installments of $700,000, again, for 5 years. So that's the remainder of that $7,350,000. I want to read section 6.2 of the settlement agreement, which is entitled Repair and Maintenance of the Phoenix Center and Tunnel. In addition to the payments set forth in Section 3.0, and that's what I just referenced, of this agreement, the city shall pay up to $6 million over a 10-year period, beginning as effective the date of this agreement for the repair and maintenance of the Phoenix Center, so as to do all of the maintenance and repairs necessary to bring and maintain the Phoenix Center into conformance with the requirements of the International Property Maintenance Code, as referenced in the Michigan Building Code and the Michigan Rehabilitation Code. The repairs and maintenance that the city commits to make shall include the electrical, lighting, elevator, and structural repairs in the north and south sections of the deck to be completed within the first 2 years after the effective date of this agreement, as more fully detailed in Exhibit 3. So, in my opinion, again, this says $6 million over a 10-year period with these repairs, some of them to commence within the first 2 years. So I just wanted council to have that information. Again, I can pass these copies around so that members can review if necessary. Here's the other part.
Okay, does anybody want to speak to
Yeah,
that?
I would like to note that the 19.5 million of the 6 million, that's part of that, but what's not in the settlement agreement is not what's on top of the facility either. So part of the IEDS report facility study did have electrical bringing up the code. I'm not sure if there was essentially a match of the settlement agreement to what is in the code, but at the same time, the top performance area was not part of that $6 million that was in that you're citing in the settlement agreement.
The purpose of me referencing that is because that's the requirement.
Right.
Okay. I think Attorney Chubb was next, and then Madam Mayor, then Councilwoman Miller.
Yeah, good evening, Council. As Ms. Sharp referenced, the specific obligations with the 2-year period from the November 2018 settlement date were to bring it into code. Those are the basic requirements of code. That's the elevators, that's the electrical, that's the necessities that the IDS report calculated at $16 million. And so that's where that number came from. It is an obligation. By November 2020, we've had several closed sessions to discuss the obligations of the settlement agreement, and I have provided several memos on that, but if the council would like to have another, of course, we're more than happy to do that.
Okay. Madam Mayor?
Yes, I would like to speak to a couple of points. And Deputy Mayor, would you, or John Ballard, would you come help pull this chart up for me right here on the table? Because I'm going to use it as a diagram. So, Ms. Fulford, for coming yet again to make sure that we're transparent and people know exactly what it is that we are doing here. And yes, of the document that Attorney Sharp was able to draft from is a public document. This has been completely transparent. Anybody can get a hold of that document because everything we have done about this settlement has been transparent, so it is public. It is on our website, or we can get it from other places and get you copies. Now, one of the things that our financial advisor has said, and he's done so many of these deals for so many municipalities, his experience is great, and so he is able to go for us and talk to us about his recommendations and able to get the money at the last price, and it's a good time for the bond market now, 3.5%, as he's told you, as well as to accomplish our goals. Now, the brilliance, and Ms. Sharp, you brought up the question of the $6 million. The $6 million will not, as you say, fulfill the entire repairs of the renovation of the Phoenix Center and amphitheater. It's just enough, and this was the brilliance of the team that did the negotiation, that instead of being required to settle this case to pay the whole $16 million, we were able to talk them into, well, just hold us responsible for the $6 million, right now. But as our financial advisor has told us a number of times, we will not be able to bond or get financing for just doing a part of it, okay? Nobody's going to finance still a decrepit building. Is that right, Mr. Financial Advisor? Yes. So that's why they had to do the whole $16 million, and that is the part that will allow us to use the amphitheater as well. And many people ask me, when they went up there for the town hall, this is great up here. This can still be ours. I said, yes, but you have to do certain movements. We have the council, we have to go ahead and move on that. The other thing that's great to hear is that we're in position to do this now. 12 years ago, the emergency manager said, tear it down, we can't afford to do it. We are now, did you hear him say, a AA bond rating? When is the last time the city of Pontiac has been in that position that we can get money at that rate? That is a good position to be in. And that's how municipalities now who are moving forward, who are doing these kind of capital projects, that's how they do them. That's the smart way to do it. TC, the new Cobra Law has now changed, and so many other projects and so many other cities. That's the way smart cities go ahead and do the progress and move forward. So that's important. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out to you, thank you, John, before I get to that, one other point. Somebody said to us, well, that's not the only way to handle the Phoenix Center. We know that. We know that. There are other options. In fact, we've tried other options. If somebody comes through and, some benefactor and says, we want to buy it for $20 million, hey, look, we sit down and talk to them in a minute. In fact, we tried to sell it. Remember Boonex Council? We worked with them for 6 months. So those, I'm talking about the other options. I'm talking. So what this is a package deal here. Council, as we took to them the options for financing, they said, well, can we still consider, if they happen to us, other options? And so those are the other three resolutions that council has to consider. While we are going through this process of seeing how we get financing, we can also, if there's a deal that comes up for private partnerships, private-public partnerships, as you said, ever say, fine, we can do that. Doesn't bond us to anything until you actually issue the bonds, which comes far down the road, right? Okay. So, in the meantime, what's pressing, and the reason we have to go ahead and do something, is this is the chart that was brought to us by our owner's rep chosen, that council, you have chosen to do the project for us, the project managers. So this is where we started from. Point to that, John, for me, right up there. This is where the court says, you got to get these repairs, renovations done, or you go back to court. And we've already spent money fighting this to get to this point. So it's not looking good if we have to go back to court if we default upon the settlement. I don't want to default upon this settlement. I hope you don't, because if we do, we not only lose the Phoenix Center, but all those damages that Ottawa Towers had sued us for, they can come back the next day in court, sue us for all those, and not only losing the Phoenix Center, but every one of us can visit a judge's levy. I don't want that to happen. I don't want another Silverdome to happen in the city. Now, in order to meet that, this is where we are right now. This is September 10th. Point to that for me. September 10th right there. That's where we should be in order to meet this deadline, okay? Where we actually are in terms of actually where we are in movement in terms of what we've accomplished is right there. So we got a gap in time. We're already behind the 8 ball a little bit. So that's why we're asking council. Look, we've been talking about this and giving you these options and thinking about these different things now since you signed the settlement November 1st. Please, don't disappoint the people of Pontiac. We need to move on with this. It takes 60 days to do this. You have to have a referendum necessary. So don't put us in such hot water that we miss this deadline for getting that gap of where we should be and where we are right now get bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's what I wanted to show you primarily. And as we said, you have the 4 other options that you asked for, or the 3 other options you asked for council.
We'll talk about that when we
so
get
those
there.
other things can go concurrently while we are also going through the bond process. And whichever goes for us the best first, that's what we can go with. All right?
Councilwoman Miller, and then Attorney Sharp.
Thank you. In layman term, I'm talking to the citizen. I'm just going to do it in layman term. I was sitting here thinking about, let's say you're going out and you're going to buy a home. Or you got a home. Let's say you got a home. And to fix your home is going to take $6 million just to bring it up to code and livable. But then, you're looking at another home, but you got to borrow money to get that home, so you go to $19 million. That's not smart. You take care of what you got and take care of the $6 million, and if things get better, the economy gets better in the city of Pontiac, time move on, then we can upgrade the Phoenix. And in that way, you will have money that will not. Don't allow anyone to sugarcoat this. No matter how it goes, city of Pontiac, you're going to be paying for this building. I will not lie to you. You will be paying for this $19.9 million. Now, to say that we it'd be better for me to pay the $6 million right now, and if things get better, maybe it'll get better around the city in time to come. Who knows? Who knows? And by the way, Mayor, on your survey, you got 16, and then on this, you have 19. You gotta make your mind which one.
It's interest for 19, the 19 interest is
You don't
explained to
understand
you.
that.
Well, they understand. I think a lot of people understand what we think they
Excuse me, Miller has the floor.
I just want to throw that out to the residents. No matter what happens, you're going to have to pay this money. The Phoenix Center look all great and fine. What good is a city all grown up, grass need cutting, and you can't get around the streets icy, and we need to save money? We got it's a situation like I tell my kids, you got to keep your priorities right now. Yes, I love Phoenix Center, I do, but I don't want you paying excess money out of your pocket that a lot of homeowners cannot afford. Mr. President.
All right, Attorney Sharp.
I just wanted to make council aware of the default provision. So in the event that Ottawa Towers does not believe that the city is maintaining or repairing the Phoenix Center in compliance with the agreement, Ottawa Towers has to provide a written notice to the city and give the city 7 days to reply or cure. If this does not occur, Ottawa Towers can commence an expedited mediation known as JAMS.
Oh,
Okay.
And if I can just comment on that, that's a 7-day notice where if they determine we are in default, and we then have 7 days before we go back in front of Judge Rosen and show where we are on that 2-year chart, we're a year behind or 2 years behind, that puts us in an incredibly weak position. It's a much weaker position than we were in when we were able to obtain this settlement.
so Attorney Chubb, you're telling me that paying these people $7 million puts us in a weaker position because before the settlement, we hadn't paid them anything. We've already paid them 3.5. We're on schedule to pay them over the next 4 years, $700,000 apiece. And you're telling me a judge is going to say that we're in a weaker position because what we didn't do was pay $19 million to fix the center, but they've already got their cash settlement. And so they are out of harm. They can move wherever, because the argument and the reason that you guys came to us with the settlement that you got was because of the exposure and how much cash you would have to pay them. The city has not defaulted on any payments to Ottawa Towers as far as cash compensation. Is that correct?
No, we've been in compliance with the settlement agreement.
Hold on, answer my question. The city has not defaulted on paying Ottawa Towers any cash payments that they are owed, yes or no?
That's not a question relevant to
No, it's very relevant.
There was no claim that we ever defaulted on cash payments to Ottawa Towers.
So just answer my question, please. If it doesn't have any bearing on that, it has bearing on what I want to know. So because we've been paying it, and the citizens need to know if we've been paying that particular debt on time. Have we paid Ottawa Towers in a timely fashion, yes or no?
We haven't paid them because other than under the settlement agreement, because we had no obligation to pay them.
So did you pay Ottawa Towers $3.5 million?
Under the settlement agreement,
Answer the question. Yes.
It was the settlement agreement you approved.
Mr. Chubb, Mr. Chubb, we've been having a very productive meeting. Now we get to an impasse, and you choose to add extra stuff to my question. Ottawa Towers been paid $3.5 million.
Yes.
Council President?
Yes, Attorney Sharp.
I just want to say this. So under 3.0 with payments, in consideration of the immediate discharge of all liens and encumbrances of the Phoenix Center, as provided here in section 2.2 and the full, final, and absolute release of all claims described in section 4.0, release and waiver of claims, the city shall pay Ottawa Towers and North Bay Drywall profit sharing plan and trust jointly and severally a total of $7,350,000 without any offset or deduction for any reason in the manner and form as provided below, to answer your question.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Sharp. I'm going to ask, because they're going to keep bringing this issue back. I need to ask this question first. What is the estimated cost of the transaction to the bond attorney?
The estimated cost of doing the transactions, these are the three highlights areas. One is When bonds are sold in the marketplace, there is usually what is called an underwriter, is essentially like a Merrill Lynch, B of A Merrill Lynch or something like that. They get a compensation of usually about 1.5%, I'm just estimating. And that's usually set in by the marketplace. So for example, when bonds are sold, it can be put into the newspaper and then they submit bids to the municipal entity. Then Mr. Liscombe, who represents, is with Miller Canfield, his firm would be paid, our firm would be paid, but then there was also be to comply with municipal securities rules and regulations and things like that, to make sure there's compliance with anti-money laundering. So there are numbers that are assigned. There's just some certain transactions you have to pay for a paying agent. So when you make your bond payments, you pay a firm like Bank of New York or U.S. Bank to get your money from your account to them, to all the individual bondholders. You're going to have one bondholder, or you could have thousands of bondholders based on the structure or the timing of the maturities. So,
So what is the 2% of? Is the 2% of the 19 million? Or
yes,
what?
sir. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So in real dollars, how much would that 2% be?
About $380,000, almost $400,000.
Okay, that's to you.
No, it's not to me. It's to the team of individuals that would be working. So that would be essentially the underwriter, the bond attorney, all transactions costs is what we estimate at this time.
Okay, thank you. I would ask, does anybody else have a question?
I had a couple of them.
Okay, go ahead.
Clear there. Since the lawsuit is all done with, then it's how we got here. We entered into at least 9 lawsuits, and we lost all 9 of them. During the time we lost these lawsuits, there was a time in 2006 and 2013, I have the documentation, that Oakland County and the county commissioner were liable to do all the maintenance. There's a time in 2014 where our tower said they was going to do the electrical, the mechanical, no financial charges to the city of Pontiac. But somehow all these other parties got off the hook, and only the citizens are stuck with it. Just making it real clear. And we're only talking about the garage. We're not talking about the towers. The towers have unlimited use of that garage for the next 10 years, plus a lot of other promises that I do not know. Literally, I know what the front is, I know what the back is of the settlement, and there's a piece in the middle. There's not a whole piece. It's only this much that I know of. I don't know about all the rest of it. So there are promises made, but we're not talking about it. We can't talk about it because we don't know. So all I'm saying is that whatever we agree to, other than we bought the building, we bought the garage. The Stevensons still own the towers. The towers are up for sale, what, $17 million? So whoever stays in the tower gets the free use of whatever we got to maintain. I think it's a hell of a deal that the city made for a lawsuit.
We lost it.
Councilwoman Kubler?
Mr. Chubb, Mr. Loeffler, can you please, the towers, the parking lot was mentioned, the parking structure, but isn't there a number on how many parking spots that they can use for 10 years? If I remember right, it's like 250.
Yes, I can answer that.
Madam Mayor, please answer.
Yes, there's a number of parking spots, and what they're using right now is about 300, but they have a little bit more which they can use for, as part of the, not having to give them the cash, the $19 million we're suing us for, we negotiated other terms so that they get some free spaces for a certain amount of time. Now, the development agreement that was written 30 years ago, and that was a thing that we were bound by as we went to court, gave them perpetual easement rights, you know. At that time, when General Motors, we did the development agreement with General Motors, everybody thought General Motors was going to be there forever and ever. So they were given perpetual easement rights, okay? So that's something that was something the courts upheld. There was nothing we could do to change that. So one of the ways we negotiated down, so we didn't have to pay that $19 million they wanted to sue us for, plus the $5 million in lien for the repairs they did, was to say, okay, we'll give you this, and they settled for that. So that's very important. Now, the option that...
Hold on, Madam Mayor. She asked you about how many parking spots.
So they have, I believe, and once again, I've a lot of numbers here since we signed this. They have 400 right now. I believe it's like 700 to 1,000 spaces, and that depends on what other parts that they renovate. So right now, they're in the one building, but if they once we renovate the other parking, part of the parking garage, then if they fill that other part, then they'll have some additional spaces. So those are numbers that are all in the settlement, but I can't recreate them off the top of my head right now.
Okay,
Okay,
Councilman
Peeler has the floor.
It was, first off, to start the conversation with, it's 300, now it's down to 700, now it's to 1,000. I need one of you to answer that question, because obviously the mayor is not answering the question.
Council President, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Petola, I don't recall the number off the top of my head. Like I said, if we want to talk about this agreement that we entered into November of last year, we can do it in a closed session, would be my recommendation.
Okay,
Get a copy of the
but
settlement.
what, Madam Mayor, no, you do not have the
Councilwoman
floor.
Peeler has the floor. Please.
The
Order.
point is, the mayor's saying 300 she started off with, then she went to 700, and then she went to 1,000. The point is, they have a minimal spot, they do not have the whole darn parking structure.
Right.
Is
They
that-
do not have the whole parking structure. The number differentiates if certain buildings are occupied. That's what makes it switch from 300 to a higher number.
Yes, we do need that information sent to us.
Okay. Are you finished,
Thank you.
Councilwoman
I
Peeler?
am. Thank you.
Attorney Sharp?
It was just to indicate that in terms of the parking rights are clearly granted to clarify Ottawa Towers' perpetual parking and access rights in respect to the parking garage. Ottawa Towers will have free parking in the parking garage for 10 years. After 10 years, Ottawa Towers has the right to renew this parking garage agreement for successive additional 10 years.
Yep.
Right, but that's part of the easement rights.
It
from when
continues.
The towers
So
were
just to let
built.
you know.
Yes, I heard that. But that is continuous because we have easement rights to the towers that they do own. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to ask the rules be suspended so we can vote on items 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19.
I'm going to ask that we carry this to the formal session because, no, we just haven't had time to study this whole thing.
Support.
Because this is our study session, not our formal session.
We did that last week. We voted on four things last week was study, so we can't go there. So, I
All right.
support.
It's been moved and supported to suspend the rules. Okay.
To vote on 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19.
Okay. Roll call?
Carter.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Petola.
No, as I stated, there hasn't been enough time to study this, considering everything else we had to go through this weekend.
Taylor Burks. Waterman.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes. All right, motion passes to suspend the rules. Item number 15, resolution to approve a notice of intent to issue capital improvement bonds, Series 2019, limited tax obligation in amount not to exceed $19,500,000.00 for the purpose of paying all or part of the cost of acquiring, constructing, furnishing, and equipping improvements to the parking deck, plaza, and related improvements to the city's Phoenix Center. Is there any city council discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
You need to have him, don't
Oh, need to
move.
move in second.
Right.
No.
I move second.
So
All right, it's
moved.
been moved and supported.
Burks. Supported
All right,
by
now, any city council discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Carter.
No.
Miller.
Okay, wait a minute. You got me confused. The no-
Yes. Approve the bonds, no is to not.
Okay,
The notice of bonds.
Miller. What
No.
was- No, okay. Petola.
Considering I have asked with the death of Don, and because there's a violation in the Open Meetings Act minutes, I asked you to rewrite them. I did state that we don't have enough time to read this. You don't want to go that route. So I am going to vote yes. I don't have the authority in me to change the vote because my colleagues do.
Taylor Burks.
she's not supposed to debate when she votes.
No, okay. Waterman. Williams.
No. All right,
Four nays.
Motion
one yea.
fails to approve the notice of intent. Item number 16, resolution to authorize the mayor to issue a request for proposal, an RFP, to invite qualified parties to submit proposal for the purchase of the Phoenix Center facility.
Move.
Moved by Waterman.
Is there support?
I'll support it.
All right, it's been moved and supported. All right, any city council discussion? All right, seeing, you got a discussion?
Oh, a minor thing, Chuck, you might can answer it. Is the Phoenix still paying for the electricity for the building, or are we paying it? Ottawa, I'm sorry. So I gotta know.
We're
It's
paying.
my understanding we're paying for it at this point. Is that correct, Mayor?
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Okay, any other discussion?
That's all.
Roll call?
Miller,
No.
Petula,
Yep,
Taylor Burks, Waterman,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Carter.
No.
Fails.
so y'all wanna hang
3
on to it.
yeas, 3 nays, so fails.
Okay. Item number 17, resolution to authorize the mayor to issue a request for proposals to invite qualified parties to submit proposals for leasing of the Phoenix Center facility. Is there a move?
Support it.
It's been moved and supported. Any city council discussion? Seeing none, roll call?
Petula,
Yes,
Taylor Burks,
No.
Waterman,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Carter,
No.
Miller.
Yes.
Okay.
Think we split it.
still fail.
Okay, motion passes for leasing of the Phoenix Center facility. All right, number 18, resolution to authorize the mayor to issue a request for proposal to invite qualified parties to submit proposal for the management of the Phoenix Center facility. God bless you.
Move.
Support.
All right,
Supported by Petula.
any city council discussion? Seeing none, roll call?
Taylor Burks,
This is to try to get this out of our hand doors, to get somebody to come in.
Right.
yes. Okay. Waterman,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Carter,
No.
Miller,
Yes.
Petula.
Yes,
Okay.
All right, motion passes for a resolution to authorize the mayor to issue requests for proposals to invite qualified parties to submit proposal for the management of the Phoenix Center facility. Item number 19.
Move.
support.
All right, it's been moved and supported. Any city council discussion?
I have one question. This has nothing to do with the lawsuit. I just want to finalize the lawsuit, but this has nothing to do with the lawsuit. I just want to know.
I can't say that it has nothing to do with the lawsuit. What I'm saying to you is right now,
We trying to,
we need, this would be to do a public-private partnership. And so depending on what that, the buyer or the party that enters in is going to determine what happens with the lawsuit. So I can't say it doesn't have anything to do with the lawsuit.
Very little. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion?
That's it.
Roll call?
Waterman,
yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Carter,
No.
Miller,
Yes.
Petula,
Yes,
Taylor Burks.
All right, resolution to authorize the mayor to issue requests for proposals to invite qualified parties to submit proposal for the public-private partnership with a qualified party or parties for the Phoenix Center facility passes, which brings us back to the agenda, which is now item number 3, which is the community benefit ordinance timeline. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. President. So in your packet is just a timeline which highlights the events that have occurred since I first asked this council to adopt a community benefits ordinance. That was way back on March the 5th.